On Monday, President Muhammadu Buhari's spokesman, Femi Adesina, assured the public that the president's democratic credentials would not change whether he assents to the Electoral Act Amendment Bill or not. Adesina's remarks came on the heels of a THISDAY news report that the Independent National Electoral Commission had written to the president in response to clarifications that he sought on the bill and advised him to assent to the legislation. Speaking when he appeared on Channels Television, Adesina said Buhari had already created a reputation of clean elections, in quotes, for himself, whether he signs the Electoral Bill or not. On November 19th, Buhari received the Electoral Bill from the National Assembly for his assent. He has 30 days to assent to the bill or withhold his approval. Since the bill was sent to him, speculation has been rife that the president may not sign the bill into law due to the controversy that has trailed the retention of only direct mode of primaries for political parties. Now joining us to discuss the electoral bill before the president and why it is incumbent on him to sign it into law is Fred Nzeakor, a lawyer and public affairs analyst. Welcome to the show, Mr. Nzeakor. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Well, good to have you with us this morning. Very quickly, the Electoral Act Amendment Bill that was forwarded to the president for his assent. He later saw the advice of INEC, and INEC has replied to say the president should go ahead and that INEC is ready, since they will be the ones to give effect to many of the provisions.
Yes.
Then, of course, he has also sought the advice of the Attorney General. The ruling party has held a session between parliamentarians and the governors on it. Opinion is divided within the party. But in your view, what do you think the president should do?
For the umpteenth time, Nigerians have expected a good electoral act. I recall that in the last one that had been used, that of 2010, amended in 2011, and then Mr. President declined assent to the last bill that was sent to him prior to 2019 election, and that raised a lot of brouhaha. Now, for the first time again, the civil society groups are on the same page with the representatives of the people at National Assembly in putting together this amendment bill of the Electoral Act. And the Nigerians generally are almost on the same page on this issue. So I should expect and I should want Mr. President to sign this bill because the consultation that Mr. President is said to be making is consulting with people who themselves were part and parcel of the making of this law, or rather this bill. So, and that is why it's also good that you mentioned that INEC had given its own nod to Mr. President to go ahead and sign. The Office of the Attorney General, I guess, must have also done that. And if the laws are not meant to be in line with the expectations of political parties. Political parties are supposed to come under the law and not to determine whether Mr. President will sign or not. So if opinions are divided among political parties, that does not really hurt, because in the process of making this bill, there was town hall meetings, and then most of the consultations were done. So I should expect, going direct to your question, that Mr. President should sign this bill into law.
Where do you stand on that controversy between direct primaries and indirect primaries? Because obviously you're aware that there has been a lot of dispute on the fact that political parties are being told by legislation how to conduct their internal democracy. They no longer will have that flexibility. There are also financial constraints that have been cited, and that being included in the bill is, a cog in the wheel at the moment. Should the president go ahead and sign with this contentions issue as a part of the bill?
I must tell you that the problem is not whether it's direct or indirect. The problem is with the operators of the system. There was nothing wrong with indirect process. There is also nothing wrong with the direct process. Everything is wrong with the implementation of whatever process. Because if you look at all the arguments, the argument in favor of the direct is that they say it depends democratic process, whereby the people are involved one-on-one in determining their candidates at elections, all members of the political party. So, but the argument against that is that it is cumbersome and expensive. Then the next question will be, what makes it expensive, if not that effort by aspirants to induce the members of the party to vote one way or the other, which on its own is corrupting the system. So if that is the only argument against direct primaries, then the argument will not hold waters at all. They also looked at the issue of whether INEC will be able to monitor. But INEC is not the one conducting the election. INEC's own is to monitor. And INEC has said that we are capable to do so. So if that will go to deepen our democratic process, there's nothing wrong absolutely about it. But we must checkmate all the valves, all the loose valves that politicians will capitalize on to advance their personal interests, personal idiosyncrasies and then opinions, and against what the law has provided. Yes, it is agreed that even the Supreme Court has said that parties should be allowed to handle their affairs. But when they are not handling it in a manner that will help to deepen our democracy, then it is nice to bring it into law. So I don't think there's anything wrong with bringing it into focus in terms of the new amendment of the Electoral Act.
Why should Nigerians be held to the jugular by the selfishness of governors and lawmakers? Why is it about them, really? Why is it that now that we have something that will deepen democracy that we fought for all this while, the selfishness, the single-mindedness, the all about themselves and all the isms you can ever think of the governors and the lawmakers might truncate this now, because we started this motion again, just like we did in 2019, back and forth, yes. Before you know it. Because as at this point now, we've just written letters to understand what the bill is, and INEC has replied. But are we still going to get to a point again where we'll start to say commas were not put, T's were not crossed, I's were not dotted, and we go all that gamut again because of the selfishness of some people?
And that is why we keep asking Mr. President to assent to the bill, so that he will undermine those ones who want to undermine the system. Those ones who want to hold Nigeria to the jugular, he will now cut them short by assenting to this bill. If there are I's and T's that needed to be dotted and crossed, that is not ever a problem, because in constitution making or in law making, those are natural expectations that there could be typographical errors, the one you call the devil's error. But that does not hurt the making of the law. So if there are issues that needed to be dotted and crossed, those are not the problems. The major issues are already in the amendment bill before Mr. President. Mr. President continues delay is now lending credence to this fear that you are now enunciating about politicians holding the rest of the people on to ransom, so to speak. But you must know that an average politician all over the world is selfish. That is basic line that you must understand. But it is the law that tries to curtail such selfishness. It is the law that tries to galvanize all those interests in favor of the people. The welfare of the people is paramount. In this case, the issue of deciding who gets what and who becomes what in the electoral process is the one in issue now. And that is the most important aspect of our national development, because the very moment you get it wrong, from the point of election, we get it wrong even at policy making and policy implementation. So it is very important and very crucial that the credible people, the right people are elected. And these are all things that go into the process. So if this process will make the right people to be thrown up in leadership, then we continue to ask Mr. President to assent to this bill.
Two quick things. Well, the concern that has been expressed is because of time, basically, I guess.
Absolutely.
The 30 days window will expire on December 19.
Yes.
And if as at now, the president has not yet, signed the bill, then people have every reason to be anxious, because people are saying, well, December 15, the National Assembly is likely to proceed on Christmas break and return in January. So do you foresee a situation whereby the National Assembly may have to veto that bill? Or it is possible between now and the 19th that the president will give his assent or ask for modifications, which was the case in 2018, 2019.
Yes.
And the argument was that the reforms that are required, there wouldn't be enough time to put them in place. But this time around, the issue of enough time to do the corrections, if any, will probably not arise.
Yes.
Then the second issue I wanted you to comment on are the vacancies, the 6 vacancies in INEC at the directorate level. There are vacancies from about 5 zones,
yes.
and there is an outstanding vacancy from 2019 that had not been filled up. Now, what do you think we should expect? Because it looks like certain partisan recommendations were made in the past. What will you be saying to President Buhari at this time?
Well, I will be telling Mr. President to accent to this bill. I mean, so that we don't go that terrible route of back and forth that we experienced in 2018, which affected the acceptance and credibility, so to speak, generally of the 2019 election, because it was said to be conducted with an act that was yearning for amendment. And then the amendment came and it was never signed into law. This time around, like you said, there's enough time. 2023 is fast approaching, and we need to get it right. What are the laws with which to conduct the election? And then, most importantly, like you said, the Electoral Management Body, the INEC. This is a body that is saddled by law and constitution to handle issues about the election. And then INEC is made up of people, the chairman, the national commissioners, the resident electoral commissioners, and the rest of them. And then there are 6 vacancies in the national electoral and at the national commissioners level. Each commissioner, you recall, each national commissioner is in charge of about 3 states. So what it now means is that 18 states out of the 36 are loosely under no national commissioners control and handling. And it is important that Mr. President fills these vacancies. One of the major steps that I would recommend, and which most Nigerians have started talking about, is look inwards. Get the people that are already experienced. There are so many state recs, state resident electoral commissioners that are not just experienced, but are also very credible. That the credibility can always be vouched for by all those who have experienced the election process in Nigeria and by the civil society as well. You can elevate those ones and then bring in fresh hands to join them. Electoral management is an experience that you don't buy in one day. It is not like you go to the shop and you pick it up. It's not an off-shelf thing. You gather that experience over time. And if you blend the new with the old, that's where you now have a seamless process that will not truncate our democratic experience. Recall that in 2007, that is the election that brought in President Yaradua, he himself said that the process was faulty. And for everything that needs to be done to ensure that we limit the faultiness of any electoral process, that is the best way to deepen our democracy. And one of the major steps is to ensure that the credible, capable people are put on the saddle to manage the electoral process. We already have quite a number of them. Of course, the presidency and the president himself would have received some recommendations from the crop of people that are already in the system. And then the idea is elevate them, just like a judge is good at the High Court. You elevate the judge to the Court of Appeal. A judge is good at the Court of Appeal. You elevate the judge to the Supreme Court. If a resident electoral commissioner is good on his job, and then the system will recommend him and know that he can handle the office of the National Commissioner, elevate such ones, and then fill the gap with outsiders. That way, we are going on with our democratic experience without truncating the process. Now, if that is not done, and if more time is wasted, what it now means is that by the time the National Assembly comes back in January, most likely maybe second week of January, and then this process is not either accented to or declined by Mr. President, then we are modified. Then we are in the middle of nowhere. Then we are now back to 2018 experience, and that's why we urge Mr. President not to allow that. He has every opportunity this time to leave a legacy of good electoral process. And anybody can say that Mr. President will have been trying his very best in allowing free and fair, credible election. And there are so many developments in the electoral system that you can ascribe to his regime, this time around. But if credible people are not put in place, and then this act is not signed, this bill is not signed into law, it may rewind the hand of the clock. And then some of those gains under his regime may be affected adversely.
Well, some people are even saying, well, maybe the retiring directors should be given a second term of 5 years. If you say experience is important.
There are many people who are not retiring, who are in the system. So those ones that can be elevated and then fresh hands be brought in. What it takes is do not just bring neophytes, so to speak. Those who will just begin to learn on the job completely. At least let there be people who, under the peer review mechanism, will be able to impart knowledge and experience, and then they have garnered over the years on the ones that are coming in on board newly. And that is the expectation of Nigerians. And if Mr. President assents to this bill, it is not only the issue of direct primaries. What of the issue of electronic transmission? All the technical developments with respect to the beavers and rest of them that will help to advance the cause of our democracy. So we cannot but ask Mr. President to, if he's consulting, let him fast forward his consultation and then sign this bill into law before the National Assembly goes on break. And then we have not seen a veto in this administration. We have not got an experience where National Assembly has vetoed Mr. President's accent. But let this not be the first time that will happen, even though I do not think that they will have the capacity, or rather the temerity to veto. Instead, they will continue to negotiate and negotiate, and time will be running out. So instead of all that time running out, what is worth doing is worth doing well. The President should sign this bill and then fill up all the necessary gaps in INEC for us to be able to move forward. 2023 election is a reset election. It's very important that Nigerians know it. Mr. President is not coming for a third term. He's exhausting his second term. So brand new president will come on board. And then most times when happens like that, like the case of the immediate last election in Anambra State, you see a lot of desperation on the part of politicians to get power. So when it happens and you don't have a robust law to control the process, a robust law to put things in place, that's when you begin to have challenges and problems. And 20-something years after, into our fourth republic and the continuous democratic experience, we shouldn't have allowed such problems to take place.
Well, you referred earlier to improvements, advances that have been made under the Buhari administration.
Yes.
But I want you to expand on that. What is this aspect of his legacy? We do hope that it will include at some point the Electoral Amendment Act whenever it's passed. But so far, how would you say he has fared? Obviously, his spokesperson, Femi Adesina, gave him glowing marks, as one would expect. But what's your take?
I think to some extent, outside the 2019 presidential election, all other elections, one can say Mr. President had not meddled into them. And what worries Nigerians is when there is overbearing influence of Asorok, especially at the state levels, when the interest of the political parties in power is protected more than the interest of the people, more than the interest of the nation, then it raises a lot of apprehension. And Mr. President, one can say, has not meddled into the electoral process, especially in the states. In most of these standalone elections, the one in Anambra, with all the hue and cry, it went well. The one in those states, with all the challenges, it went well. And all other ones, Nigerians can very easily say that Mr. President does not meddle into. He possibly does not want a situation where only his party will be the party in power. Let there be election that will be decided by the people themselves, and whoever that they vote should now lead, and that is most important. More elections are coming. It is coming very soon, and one of the elections, FCT is coming even early in January. So as long as there is no such overbearing influence of Asorok in the process, one can give Mr. President some pass mark in that regard. But now, if this bill is not signed into law, it will rewind the hand of the clock. It will be a clock in the wheel of progress. Because what you now mean is that we cannot imagine going to 2023 election with 2010 Electoral Act. That will not be good for Nigeria.
So a lot of people have even argued, based on this direct primary, that what is it the politicians really want? And they allude to the case of Anambra, where somebody said he had over 300,000 votes in his party's primary.
Yes.
And at the elections, he can get up to 50 or
Up to
60,000 votes.
50,000. Yes.
So they're really asking, what's the point of these politicians? That's one. Number two will be that can critical action by the public also deliver on the signing of this electoral bill? And why do I ask that? It's the fact that prior to this time, the lawmakers went against the people's wish. In fact, most lawmakers abstained from voting that day. Some of them went to the toilet, like Dr. Martin would fondly say, and the likes. But because of the pressure, they reversed their own decision.
Yes.
Initially.
Yes.
So can that critical action deliver this?
Well, the lawmakers are representatives of the people, and it is taken that in democracy, once they have spoken, the people have spoken. And that is why when they wanted to speak, not the voice of the people rose against them, and on the issue of electronic transmission of votes. And we saw it, and they rescinded their decision, and they came back to really represent the people's voice, which is what it should be, because they are representatives of the people. Now that the people are on the same page with their representatives, that means the people have spoken, and they want Mr. President to assent to this bill. The politician, like I told you, will always want to win election, and will always be an incurable optimist, even in the face of declining propensity of his optimism. He will want to clutch on to the last hope and expect victory, even when he's being stared in the face by failures. And that is why people have carpeted these direct primaries. But Mr. President himself should not use that as a major yardstick, because it was the direct primaries that brought him to power in 2019. Recall that the APC then used the direct primaries to determine their presidential candidacy in the person of President Muhammad Buhari. So he should even be the one to teach us, to teach the rest of the people, the benefit and merits of direct primaries. So if anybody is bringing an argument against that process, then the president should be in a position to tell the fellow, no, your argument does not hold waters, because I know firsthand that this will deepen our democratic process. Yes, it is expected that if there was honesty in the process, and that was why I said that it is the people, the actors themselves, that we should be worried about, and not the process. Because even the indirect, there was nothing wrong with it, but it comes with it the overbearing influence of the big wigs of politicians. Now the direct primary is expected that it is now the dictatorship for the proliferate, according to Karl Marx. You are no longer talking about the big wigs. You're talking about the people themselves deciding who their candidate will be. If that process is anchored well, you wouldn't have this experience that you said about a candidate claiming to have 300-something thousand votes from his party and then getting less than 50,000 at the election. Does that now mean that his party men and women did not vote for him? Or does that now mean that he did not actually get those number of votes at the primaries? What it simply shows is that the primary was a charade. That is simply what it means. Because if it was diligent and decorous and with the expectation of the people, then at least the party people, even if it's half of them that voted at the election, he would have made over 150,000 votes. But what it now means is that the manipulative tendencies of politicians was what was in place in that election, in that primaries. Whatever that is to be done, such manipulative tendencies of politicians must be checkmated. And that is why you need an INEC that will be peopled by people with capacity, that will be manned by people that have guts and balls, that can stand their ground, irrespective of the shakings of politicians, because the politicians will shake you very well, shake you in all manner, physically, financially, and otherwise, induce you in so many ways. Men and women who can stand against such inducements and such intimidation are the people we expect to be appointed as national and commissioners.
Well, it's good you brought up the issue of the political parties. After the 2019 general election, the INEC chair, in the review meetings that they had, one of the concerns he expressed was about internal democracy within the parties. And that without internal democracy, the entire democratic process may be derailed. So it's one thing to have the law, to have the legal framework.
Yeah.
There is another thing for the political parties to also be ready. Now, if you look at what's going on in the major political parties, do you think anyone can rely on these political parties to defend the cause of democracy?
Ruben, I must be honest with you that the desperation among politicians is still a very major problem in Nigeria, whereby many politicians do not understand that politics should be for service and not just for self-aggrandizement and power grabbing. Now, the major problem that we've always had, which is the issue against, the argument against the indirect primaries, is the overbearing influence of the leaders of political parties, the power brokers, the financial arrowheads of political parties, who once they dole out their money, they will want everything to go their way, irrespective of where the minds and opinions of the people are, and irrespective of whether the fellow they are throwing up to grab an office is capable to hold that office or not. It is the law that will checkmate this, and it is the implementation from men and women of strength and integrity that will ensure that the law is respected, and not to dance to the whims and caprices of the political parties, who themselves will ordinarily, if you ask them, they will want a 100% win. And that is why even in local government elections, have you ever seen any other party that is not in power even make any progress at local government elections? That gives you an impression, a clear impression of the thinking and the mindset of an average Nigerian politician. And it is the system that should not allow that. Instead, we should be angling towards real democracy. And what we mean by real democracy? Uninduced, uncoerced, unmanipulated, and by the will of the people.
Well, thank you very much, for joining us. Thank you very much indeed. We hope the President, as you have recommended, will sign the Electoral Act Amendment Bill into law.
Many thanks.